Hopefully I remember how to speak publicly. It's been a long, long, long time. But thanks for coming, and this, oh boy, that doesn't work. This all worked this afternoon.
Just click on the slide to put focus on it, and then you should be able to go.
Here we go. All right. Yeah. So, I want to get into a couple of ground rules here. There's no such thing as a dumb question, as proven by the things I just asked you guys. And if you hear me use a term you don't know what it means, you stop me and you say, what does that mean? Okay? Because the problem with having engineers teach engineering is that they assume everyone knows what they know. Okay, it's a typical problem with engineering type people. Okay, so I'm admitting my faults, and I need you to correct me when it happens. So, if I say phase angle and you go, you don't know what that is, you stop me and ask me what it is. And then, of course, don't be shy. Yes, sound men are legendary for being grumpy. They're also legendary for being control freaks. Now, I know pretty much everybody in this room, and I have not picked up that kind of attitude. But usually people who come to me and ask me to run sound want to be in charge of something. And they like to boss people around and stuff like that. So I'm just trying to make sure we're all on the same page.
I mean, we can play that role if you want us to.
Okay. Okay. Be almost,
Like, okay.
be almost always be willing to learn. So I've been doing live sound for about 25 years, and I learned the last time I did it, yesterday morning, I learned something new. The time before that, there was another audio engineer running who was really good, so I just let him do it, and I watched what he was doing, and I learned 2 or 3 new things. So no matter how much you think you know, this subject is so deep and so vast. That's why I really like it. You can always learn something new. So these are the goals of the course. You want, I was talking with Nathan about this, when you do your job well, no one's going to know you exist. So if you're in this to get kudos, you're in the wrong room, okay? If you do your job well, people are going to say the band was great. They're not going to say you did a great mix. Now, once in a while, I'll get somebody like Neil walking up to me and saying that, or Nathan. But the name of the game is for you to create an experience in the room that not just reproduces well what the band is doing, but actually enhances it. You're the 5th member of the band, so to speak, depending on how many people are in the band. It's an extremely important role, and it's easily screwed up, especially if you've got the wrong attitude. But it's very important to be very actively involved with what's going on stage. Most of you are players, and you know that you have to pay attention to what's happening in your earphones. You have to pay attention to, if you don't have the click track and the music going on in your phones, but it's wedges and old school. I don't know what you guys do live. That's probably what you don't have click tracks and stuff, you know. Oh, stop it. You just have to really be aware of your environment, and the same is true when you're running sound. Not just the band, but if you see people wincing, you know you're doing something wrong. Be a servant. It's important to have a servant attitude, okay? When I'm working with bands, I always think of myself as they're my customer. I need to make them happy, because if they're happy, they're gonna have a really good performance. So if I'm in a hurry with any kind of sound situation, I try and get their monitors together first, okay? Everybody, you know what monitors are, right? Yeah. The in-ear things or the wedges. I try to get them really happy with what's going on the stage. That's the #1 priority for me. And then secondarily, because I can do this kind of even during the first song, I try and get the front of house mixed together. Of course, hopefully there's a sound check so we can do that. Additionally, we've got this on our shoulders now, and that's going to be a little bit more of a challenge in the new room because we're going to have real drums, which are going to produce sound in the room, which means the mix that we create in the room might be different than what the broadcast needs, because we'll be hearing the acoustics in the room as well. Right now we've got those electronic drums. And, you know, they have their advantages because they don't create sound in the room and they make the broadcast mix be exactly what we're hearing through the PA, but I hate them. Okay. And then finally, this is really important. Wouldn't it be great if Nathan didn't have to worry at all about sound stuff? At all. Like if troubleshooting, whatever, he could just focus on the worship experience and ushering people into the Lord's presence, as it were. So those are the goals, okay? And
Question.
yeah.
For the foreseeable future, are we going to have a single mix for front of house and broadcast?
We'll see.
Okay.
I think it's going to be possible to set up a separate mix using this thing. And if we have enough personnel,
That's probably the biggest
uh,
variable.
well, if we have enough personnel, I would really like someone under a pair of headphones mixing from an iPad or something, doing the broadcast mix separately. So here's what you need, okay? I don't do sports analogies, I do science fiction analogies, okay? This is what you need for this course, okay? Headphones or speakers, a computer, a DAW, digital audio workstation, okay? So write this one down. You guys need to go home and you need to download Reaper if you don't have something you work with already, all right? Reaper is a really nice digital audio workstation. What we're gonna end up doing is I'm gonna be giving you guys access to raw tracks for you to try and make them sound good as homework, okay? It's not gonna happen tonight. Tonight your homework's gonna be get that installed on your system. And finally, this is also a piece of software that you can find on the Allen Heath site. That mixer that was the first picture, that's the actual mixer we're gonna get. It's called an Avantis. And it's a really nice and sophisticated piece of gear. That Avantis Director software, I was thinking with it this afternoon, which is why my battery's low. And it seems to reproduce pretty much exactly the experience that you would get if you were standing in front of the mixer, except there's no knobs and stuff.
Best to put this like on a Windows laptop?
Yeah, Windows,
Mac
it's,
laptop?
sorry, yeah, it's Windows and Mac, both, okay? This is not an iPad.
It's a computer.
Yeah, it's a computer app, okay? And it really is fully featured. The iPad app, don't do that. The iPad app seems to be inferior to almost every other one that I've seen so far, but we'll see. I haven't been able to actually attach it. I'm running it in demo mode, and it's like missing a whole bunch of features.
If we do have a DAW that we already use, are you okay?
That's
with that,
fine.
or you want us all
Yeah, yeah.
over?
If you already are using a DAW, you guys probably have one each. You know, you do, I'm sure. Just use that. I'm just going to be throwing tracks at you. You need to have equalization, compression, gates. We're going to be talking about all that stuff. Okay. Okay. This is all the stuff we're going to talk about in this, well, in the course. Okay, this is page 1. Which is why, you know, hopefully we'll, you know, I don't know if all the modules are going to be 90 minutes long. We'll see. Okay. What is sound? The musical function of band members, song structure, sound system, bits, microphones, signal flow, EQ, compression and dynamics, effects, vocals, how to mix vocals, how to mix drums, how to mix guitars, how to mix all the other instruments, because they're not as important as those 3. Yes, they are. Wait, keyboards. Keyboards. Putting it all together, going through the actual sound check on Sunday morning. the procedure, because there is one. Well, that's the same, that's the next bullet too. Troubleshooting, very, very important module. They actually offer courses in troubleshooting, and an actual hands-on session with the Avantis. Now, once you guys are done with this, assuming everybody hangs with us, there's going to be mentoring sessions. There's only so much you can learn in a lecture format and even a lab format. You guys are going to double team stuff with me, and then I'm going to step back and let you drive, and only step in emergencies. All right, so that's the kind of PA we used to tour with back in the day. Believe it or not, that's really true. That's not our PA, but it was about a quarter that size on both sides. We had to drive a semi around just to haul the PA. And here we go. What is sound? You guys probably understand this from science class, but it's basically just vibrations in the air, right? And it actually has to reach an eardrum, and I mean, what's the sound of one hand clapping? If a tree falls in the woods and nobody's there to hear it, I mean, okay, philosophy aside, I found this slide pretty helpful. Whoops, this one right here. Sound, when you create sound, you're actually compressing and rarefying the air. So when I do that, it created a waveform that actually moves through the air from me to you at the speed of sound, 650, I should know this, 650 miles an hour, whatever it is. Actually, it's like 700 something. Help me out. Let me look it up.
Google it.
Yeah.
I didn't know there was science involved.
Yeah, right.
Oh, there's math too. Just you wait. It's great. These are the pieces of sound. Now, what I think I'm going to do after this is I'm going to make these slides available to you guys. So you'll give me their email addresses and I'll share this with you guys, all right? So you don't have to write all this down necessarily. But and this comes from the days when I used to design synthesizers. Synthesizers actually give you direct manipulative control over some of these things, not all of them. But frequency, amplitude, timbre, phase, transients, envelopes, direction, and distance. These are all things that you'll actually deal with mixing sound on Sunday mornings, okay? But they're kind of in order of importance, or should I say impact. So looking at frequency, whoops, wait a minute. Did I skip a slide?
Yeah.
There we go. Frequency is also called pitch. So C versus D versus F, which octave? The units that frequency is measured in are hertz or kilohertz. Now, there's also megahertz and gigahertz, but those are radio frequencies, okay? And this is an important point. I threw it in here because it was a convenient place to put it, but frequency and wavelength are related to each other. They're not exactly the same thing, but if you think of the analogy of throwing a rock in a pond as, making a sound, right? Creates these waves. That's exactly what happens in the air. Air is just kind of a rarefied liquid, right? There is a distance between the maximum density of the air from sort of peak to peak. If you saw that, remember that diagram earlier, right? That's a distance. That's called the wavelength. Why is that important? Because if you get in a room, as Becca experienced the other night apparently, and also the gymnasium has this horrible problem with this. You can get in a room, especially if it's nice and square and has mathematically divisible dimensions on the walls and or the ceiling. Cube is the worst space to do sound in at all, for instance. You get these things called standing waves because the wavelength of the sound is an exact multiple or an exact division of the length of the room. And then what happens is the wave bounces back and forth and builds up and starts going like that, like feedback, okay? I don't know if you guys remember before I came, but the way the gym sounded was just all bass, all bass. The gym has a horrible resonant frequency. I'm sorry, resonance. What is resonance? What I just described to you is resonance. Every physical object actually has a resonant frequency. Your body has a resonant frequency. This table, this room, okay? One of the gym's resonant frequencies is 53 hertz. If you look at the way that I had to tune the system, it's the way I had to do the equalization curve, and if you know what an equalizer is, we'll get into that. There's a huge dip at 53 hertz. I mean, I just try to eliminate it completely. On every instrument that's down in that range, I had to even do it, plus the master. So it's just a really horrible problem, but I finally got it under control, but it took me 3 Sundays to do it. So gyms are not ideal. Oops, and away we go.
There you go. It's gone.
Shoot. Can I
I have
have
to remember.
your computer?
It won't connect to the TV.
No, it's all right. We'll try and get this guy back here.
Got the whiteboard.
There you go.
So lean in, everybody. Wow, this is a drag. It'll probably charge up in a minute here. Let's see.
Just a charger issue.
Yeah, it seems to be. I mean, it's lit up, the little
it's lit up.
dongle thing's lit up.
Did you try pulling off the MagSafe and putting it back on? I've
Yeah.
had a problem with that style before.
I did it a couple of times. Yeah, I might flip it over and see what happens. I don't know.
Well, it doesn't turn on until it knows that it's charging something.
Yeah, I mean, it's indicating it's charging. Okay, this here's a chart. Okay, of frequencies. They're generally divided into kind of 3 groups, but they're subgroups. It's like lower class, middle class, upper class, you know, then there's middle class, and upper middle class. There's bass, mid-range, and high-end. Now, you guys have probably heard those bandied about, right? And this chart happens to divide it further into deep bass, low bass, mid bass, upper bass, lower mid-range, middle mid-range, upper mid-range, presence mid-range, which I've never heard of before, and high-end and extremely high-end. And down below are the actual numerical values for the frequency value. So the human ear, you've probably heard this before, hears from 20 to 20,000, which is 20 kilohertz, right? In actuality, it's very rare, especially for somebody my age, to hear beyond like 14, 15 kilohertz. I had a ghost of a problem in the studio. Did I tell you about this? Every time I'd record vocals, I could look. There's an instrumentation that I've got that's called a frequency analyzer, and you guys they use them in pop culture now all the time. So it's all the bars that jump up and down, right? There's graphical ones, and I use one to check the sanity of what I'm doing sometimes. And there was this really horrible peak right at 16 kilohertz, and I couldn't hear it at all, not at all. But I get my son, who's also a sound engineer, who's 35, and he's like, "Ow, ow, ow!" and my grandkids would. I mean, it was a good way to get them to leave the room, because I've got a little lighter thing, electronic lighter thing, that produces 16 kilohertz as well. So whenever I want them out of the room, I go, they go, "Ah!" and they run out of the room. It's great. But anyway, I could not figure out what it was. I thought it was some kind of electronics. And most of my artists didn't hear it either, but the last person I produced was like, I hear it, I hear it, I still hear it, I still hear it. And turned out, the way my studio is set up is there's a solid brick, two solid walls and a brick chimney in between me and the people that I record. Nice acoustic isolation, but we have to be able to see each other. So I've got a webcam and I use an iPad. But on their side, I've got this antique, like analog camera pointing at me, and then a wire running over to an old school Sony like tube, right? And it has a label on it that says the engineer in its natural habitat. And anyway, I was doing a session a couple of weeks ago with a string quartet, and with another engineer who came in, and he looked at that and said, "Does that make noise?" And the light bulb went on. Because analog TVs have something called a flyback transformer in them that's got an electron gun that goes back and forth, right? Flyback transformers, when that thing's turned in the corner, anytime you see a waveform with really sharp edges, that means it's got a lot of high frequency content. And this thing, when it turns the corner, that's about as sharp as you can get. And it produced 16 kilohertz. I turned it off, all my problems went away. 5 years I've been doing it. So that's what that's what I mean about learning something new. Boy, this is a drag. You can't see this. Still don't want to try it yet because there's some actual animations I want to show you. There's also a slide in here that's above the keyboard, okay? And once again, you guys go home and look at these, but it's got the ranges of all common musical instruments above the keyboard. This is a really handy thing. It's just something I know because I've been doing it for a lot of years, but a lot of times what I'll do is I'll walk up to the guitar player or the keyboard player during rehearsal and I'll say, "You guys are walking on top of each other." And what's happening is they're both playing in the same range, or they have sounds that are overlapping each other, and they're both trying to do rhythmic things. And one guy's a little bit different than the other one because nobody's perfect, and it sounds muddy. And so might say to Becca, "Could you play that up an octave?" And problem gone. It's because of this overlapping frequency stuff. Okay. Sometimes you can fix this by doing tricks with equalization. Equalization is bass, treble, all that stuff, right? So that's a handy chart to have and to look at. Second characteristic of sound is amplitude. Amplitude is the scientific name for it. Frequency is the scientific name for the previous one. It's also called pitch, right? This one's also called volume or loudness. And the units for measuring amplitude is the decibel. Decibel is a very confusing thing. I've been an engineer for too long to remember, and I use decibels in lots of other things, and I still can't understand exactly what they are. Here, I'll show you what the definition of a decibel is. This is fun. A unit used to measure the intensity of a sound or the power level of an electrical signal. So far, so good. By comparing it with a given level on a logarithmic scale. Isn't that clear as mud? Basically, what you need to get out of that is that any measure of power or sound, not of power, any measure of sound is relative. Say, someone says, "This is loud," compared to what? Are you used to sitting in a quiet room, or are you used to living next to the railroad tracks, right? So you have to choose a reference point before you can take the measurement. Now we've got a sound level meter, and it measures in decibels, but you'll notice right on the meter it's got two different ways to measure the decibels, dBA and dBc, and those are called weightings, as in heaviness, weightings, right? dBc listens to the really low bass frequencies along with everything else. And if I switch it to dBc, looks like it's really loud when it's not really that loud. I mean, if you want to add power to a mix, give it some bass. There you go. That's actually, I have that app. Yeah, that's a nice app. If you want to add power to a mix, add a little bit of thump in the low end so that people feel it in their chest a little bit. But you can keep everything else kind of decently quiet, but it'll still feel powerful without blowing people's ears out. That's kind of a trick. But you need to know about decibels because we actually have a speed limit, so to speak, on Sunday mornings, which is a lot lower than what I'm used to dealing with.
And that'll most likely change when we're in the.
Well, probably not actually, because after all that speech I just gave about how dBs are relative, it's kind of an absolute value.
Right.
Now we'll see. There's a psychological element to it. All right.
Yeah.
Like, if, for instance, if people walked in on Sunday morning and saw those speaker stacks that I had on that earlier slide, I could still measure exactly 90 decibels, but I get a lot of complaints about how loud it was, just because the speakers look big. It used to happen to me all the time. And I could pull up, because I had to finally buy an amp that actually made a record of how loud the whole thing was. Like created a graph, and I go, look, it wasn't loud. I'd have to show people that. The other thing I did was I kept a knob available that didn't do anything. People say turn it down, I go, and they go, oh, that's better. It was evil, but it worked.
What is our speed limit? I know at one time we were pushing 90.
90 is the speed limit.
That is it, yeah.
Yeah, but it honestly, the way I mix, there's yeah, it does. It peaks once in a while over. It goes like 92, something like that. The last church, our speed limit was 100, which is a rock and roll concert.
That's rolling, yeah.
Yeah, so we would hand out earplugs.
We push that. When you play, we push that a lot. Yeah. Exactly. Water town.
So here's another chart about relative levels, all right? And it's got the numerical values. So it says, for instance, 80 decibels, or excuse me, normal conversation, 60 decibels, like if Neil was to measure me right now. 70 decibels is a vacuum cleaner. I don't agree with that. I think they're about 110. Alarm clock, 80. 85 blender, smoke alarm. No, smoke alarms are like 120. They must be. 90 lawnmower. So we mix at lawnmower level. 105 sporting event. 110 concert. 120 ambulance siren. 135 air raid siren. 140 gunshot. 150 firecrackers. If you're exposed to 120 for more than like a minute or two, you start losing your hearing. You stand under a jet taking off, that's about 140. Every 10 decibels of change, that is not in the presentation anywhere, but you might want to write this down. Every 10 decibels is a doubling in level, okay? It's a doubling of how loud things are. Just 10 decibels. It's a logarithmic scale. You guys know what logarithmic scales are? Okay. Instead of having like 1, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, right, on spaces, it goes 1, 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000. If you guys have been looking about graphics about COVID, a lot of those scales are in logarithmic. You can switch between log and linear. And the reason for that is that logarithmic scales allow you to see more detail down in the lower values, if you think about it, right? Because there's less, there's less distance between 1 and 10 than there is between 10 and 100, right? And that's important for audio because this is the way your ear works too. Your ear hears things logarithmically. So it occurs in nature. It's not just something that Newton made up to annoy us, okay? Okay, this one's really fun.
You were about 40 to 60, depending on your.
How excited I was? Okay. This is an interesting one. Anybody know what timbre is? If I just say the word timbre. What does that mean? Have you heard it?
Essence of how it sounds.
The essence of it.
I
That's
mean,
pretty
like
good.
art or something, kind of.
That's pretty good. Anybody else have a stab at the definition of timbre? Or know what it might be?
Tone quality.
Tone quality? It's not bad. Anybody else? No? The official definition of timbre is one of the lamest definitions in the English language. The character or quality of a musical sound or voice that's not its pitch and intensity.
Huh?
Everything else.
It tells you what it's not. And that's the problem with timbre. It's really an elusive quality. There's nothing in the English language that sort of nails it for us, vocabulary-wise. It's like the difference between, like a flute playing a C sharp, middle C sharp, and a trumpet playing a middle C sharp. What's the difference? They're playing the same note, or a singer singing it. That thing is timbre. And here is, let me try and get this computer working again. Boot up. The age of technology. Turns out that, well, I gotta back up for a second. There's a video I'm gonna show you here if the computer can stay alive. Everybody in here know what a sine wave is? Raise your hand if you do not. Okay. A sine wave is basically the simplest tone that you can have. So like when they used to sign off on TV and back in the old days, they would have a tone that went woo, like that, right? Mm-hmm. That's a sine wave. It's extremely boring, okay? Let's see here. Okay. Okay, here we go. These are pictures of some waveforms. A tuning fork produces a sine wave. See how simple that shape is? Do a flute. Flute's still pretty simple tone, but it gets a little more interesting. You can see the waveform gets a little weirder. A voice is really strange, and so is a guitar. Why is that? Well, let's find out from this dude. If the internet works and if my computer works.
Hey, it's Andrew Wong. Today's video is about the #1 most mind-blowing thing I've ever learned about music. It's absolutely fundamental to how sound works and why we like the music we like, but a lot of people never learn about it. Even people like me, growing up in a musical family, learning lots of different instruments, studying music theory, I never even encountered this concept until I was 18 and went to university for music. What we're talking about is the harmonics series. Have a listen. The pitches in this series occur in nature, they're completely consistent, and they're quietly audible almost any time you hear a musical note. So every note is actually a whole bunch of tiny notes put together, with one exception that we'll also take a look at. I guess it's really notable. Note! Whenever you play a note, you'll be hearing a mix of these higher, quieter notes along with it, which we call harmonics or overtones. And I should clarify that it's not necessarily the exact pitches you heard in our example. The harmonics are all going to be relative to whatever note you're playing, and there's a very simple pattern behind that. Basically, every time you play a note, you're also going to be hearing a little bit of the frequency that's twice as fast, and a little bit of the frequency that's 3 times as fast, and the one that's 4 times as fast, 5 times as fast, 6 times, 7 times, 8 times. All of the integer multiples of that original note's frequency, theoretically to infinity, but in reality, only the first handful are really audible. So let's take a look at this bass guitar. The whole length of this string is vibrating, and that's what determines what note we hear. But it's also simultaneously vibrating in other modes. Here's a little diagram to illustrate. So you've got the main loudest note that you hear, the fundamental, and that is vibrating the whole length of the string. So if you picture this string wobbling back and forth, that wave is traveling all the way down the length of the string and all the way back. What we're also hearing quieter is the integer multiples of that wave. So we're hearing the wave that's twice as fast, and we're hearing the wave that's 3 times as fast, and so on. The same kind of thing happens in wind instruments where it's a certain length column of air that's resonating. So these additional waves are the harmonics, and depending on your instrument, on its design, on its shape and size, also on the way that you play it, the volume of these different harmonics can be quite different. That's why plucking a string towards its end sounds different than plucking it closer towards the middle. By plugging it in different places, the additional modes of vibration, the harmonics, may be strengthened or weakened. That's also why 2 different instruments playing the exact same note can sound completely different. The main note that they're playing, the lowest one, the fundamental, is actually completely identical, and it's just the mixture of harmonics that give each instrument its own unique character. So for example, check this out. I've got a clarinet and a guitar both playing an F here. Very easy to tell which is which, even though they're playing these tiny little notes. Let's check them out in a spectrum analyzer. Firstly, I hope you're noticing all the harmonics showing up. There are all these distinct points above the main note. There are more and more of them, and they get closer together as you go higher, but also once you get past a certain point, they start to tail off. Notice that with the guitar sound, a lot of the lower harmonics are stronger than in the clarinet. Actually, the guitar's first harmonic, its first overtone. The fundamental counts as a harmonic, and that's the one difference between the terms harmonic and overtone. The guitar's first overtone, technically the second harmonic, is stronger than the fundamental, it looks like. But now let's see what happens if I put a brick wall EQ curve there and start sweeping down.
Brick wall EQ curve, okay? Basically what he's doing is kind of turning, he's got a device, so to speak, that turns down all of the frequencies above a certain point, like a brick wall. Just says, you shall not pass, right? To all the frequencies.
Now both of them sound basically identical. We're just hearing that pure fundamental F tone. If your mind isn't blown yet, I don't know what to tell you. You're difficult to impress, or you already knew about this, and why are you watching? Now, here's an interesting thing. Overtones don't have their own overtones. Unlike the fundamental, they are pure tones without their own harmonic series. They'll sound kind of like our guitar and clarinet did when we filtered all of the harmonics away down to just the fundamental. It's a very simple, dull, plain tone. A tone that has no harmonics is a sine wave. Therefore, all harmonics are sine waves. Now, what the is a sine wave? A sine wave is the purest tone possible. It truly is just a single pitch. It's one perfect wave, visualized amazingly in this video about Fourier analysis by Smarter Every Day.
If we were to turn this circle on and watch it go up and down and up and down and trace that motion out, you get what's called a sine wave.
Fascinating video. I highly recommend it if you want to understand more about waveforms and how they interact. So if we have a musical note and we strip away all the overtones and are just left with the fundamental, that is a sine wave. We've also learned that overtones don't have overtones themselves because they're all also sine waves. So that means that any consistent pitch played on any instrument can be recreated just with the right combination of sine waves. Once again, let's quickly hop back into Ableton here. I've got the operator synth open, which is an FM synth, but it also lets you do what's called additive synthesis, which is adding sine waves together. So let's play a C, and it's just gonna do a sine wave here. Now what operator lets you do here in this kind of graph-looking area is add individually any of the first 64 harmonics. So I'm gonna hold down this note and then I'll add the first few overtones and you can hear what that sounds like. Now Now here's an interesting phenomenon. The first bunch of harmonics make up a major chord, and so when you add them one by one like that, it sounds like you're making a chord. But if I now play a scale with this sound where all the harmonics are moving along with each note, you don't really notice it anymore. It sounds like an individual note with some overtones. Let's try again, just adding harmonics at random and making a really weird dissonant chord. Like, that doesn't seem to sound good when you're just listening to the sine waves individually being added on. But if you, again, play a melody with it, it just sounds like a synth with a particular timbre. So using different combinations of harmonics is one way that, through synthesis, we can approximate real-world instruments. That's like kind of trumpety, obviously would need a bit more work, but you can hear the beginnings of that. What if we have very few lower harmonics and then add a bunch of higher ones? Get a really buzzy sound. Do some other stuff at random. So these can be the starting points for so many different timbres, which you can then further shape with other filtering or envelopes, affecting how things change over time, affecting how the volume changes. Mind blown. If I'm blowing your mind right now, please leave a comment, because I just remember when I learned about this as a little baby student and my brain was on the floor. There are, of course, plenty of things that don't vibrate at a consistent pitch. So the sounds that they make don't invoke the harmonic series. And with any real-world object, there will be imperfections that may contaminate the harmonic series. So for instance, that's why old guitar strings sound worse than new ones. When they're worn or damaged in different places, it means the string can't vibrate perfectly symmetrically, and so instead of getting the pure harmonic series, the sound will be a little bit noisier. I hope you're still with me, because we've only covered the first reason why the harmonic series is so mind-blowing. So musical notes are just collections of interacting sine waves. Doesn't matter what instrument you're playing, if it's a pitched instrument, it's a complex sine wave generator. It might also be making some other sounds, like for instance on a guitar, before the note actually sounds, you'll probably have a bit of the click or the scrape of the pick against the string. Those are inharmonic sounds, and all those little details add to the unique character of any given instrument. But the second mind-blowing thing about the harmonic series is that it's the foundation of all the chords and scales that we use. It's the reason why certain notes sound good together. It wasn't just that someone back in the day decided on a scale that they liked and we all agreed to it and are using it out of habit. It's that the physical laws of the universe determined what these note relationships would be. Long before music existed, long before humans even existed, any resonant body vibrating at a consistent frequency would also include harmonics, would include those integer multiples of that base frequency. Let's have a listen to the series again. As you can hear and see in this notation, the pitches of the harmonic series correspond with the notes and intervals used in the vast majority of music. If this low C is our fundamental, then the first overtone, the vibration that's twice as fast as that, is this C an octave up. And then the vibration that's 3 times as fast as that is the G above that. 4 times faster is another C, 5 times faster is an E, and so on. So first we're going up by an octave, and then from that note we're going up by a 5th, from there up by a 4th, then a major third, a minor third, another minor third, and then switching clefs here, we go up a major second, major second, major second. So for instance, if we play a C, look at how many C overtones we have. If we play an E with a C, well, there's a bunch of E's in the overtone series on C. And then in the overtone series on E, there's going to be all those E octaves. So you've got a lot of alignment that sounds good to us. And the reason why these intervals sound good together is because our ears are doing math. An octave is 2 notes vibrating at a 2-to-1 ratio. The next simplest whole number ratio is a perfect 5th, 3-to-2. A perfect 4th is a 4-to-3 ratio. Notes sound consonant. They sound nicely harmonized to us when the math is the easiest. Not only that, but when 2 notes related by this series are played together, they will share a lot of overlapping overtones. Now there is just one little wrench to throw in the equation. Let's get this diagram back up. Do you see these numbers across the top? Those represent how many cents sharp or flat the notes underneath them are compared to equal temperament.
Cent is 1/100th of a
That's why some of the notes were colored. The bluer they are, the flatter they are, the redder they are, the sharper they are. Now let me be clear, harmonics occur naturally and they sound like that example we've been playing throughout this video. What this diagram is showing is notes that are slightly out of tune compared to a human-made tuning system called equal temperament. What we found is that if we transposed the most audible harmonics, the first 30 or so overtones, into one octave, they would correspond pretty closely to 12 equally spaced divisions of that octave. Closely, but not perfectly. When you tune everything to 12 perfect divisions of an octave, that's equal temperament, and it's what most of the music you hear nowadays will be tuned to. The reason for this is consistency. With overtones, every note that isn't an octave of the fundamental is slightly out of tune compared to its equal temperament counterpart. That means that once you start making even slightly complex music, if you're tuned to the perfect ratios of the harmonic series, then some of your intervals will be out of tune with each other. For instance, let's look at the first major thirds that occur in the harmonic series on C. We have a C to an E here, so the fourth and fifth harmonics, a 5:4 ratio. The C is perfectly in tune because it's an octave of the fundamental. The E, though, is 14 cents flat compared to what it would be in equal temperament. Let's have a listen to the subtle difference between these two thirds. The next major third is this B flat going to this D. Now this B flat, which is a perfect 7:1 ratio going to our C fundamental, is already 31 cents flatter than an equal temperament B flat. So if we want a pure 5:4 ratio major third up from this B flat, it should be a D that is 14 cents even flatter than this. So a D that is 45 cents flat. But this D, which is a perfect 9:1 ratio from our fundamental, is 4 cents sharp. So look what's happening with these ratios. On our first major third, this C and E, we have a 5:4 ratio. The B flat to the D is a 9:7 ratio. It's similar, but it's slightly off. If it were 10:8, of course, it would be perfect because that's an exact doubling of 5:4. And as you can see here on our 8th and 10th harmonics, we again have that C and E. So if you were writing a piece that went from a C major chord to a B flat major chord, you would have two different sounding major thirds there. You'd also have a completely different interval moving the whole tone from the B flat to the C, where the first note is 31 cents flat, than you would moving from the C to the D, also a whole tone, but the second note is 4 cents sharp. Equal temperament divides the octave equally so that every whole tone is the same as every other whole tone. Any given major third is the same spacing as any other major third. It's a tuning system of compromise so that every possible interval or chord change in any key sounds equally in tune, or depending on how you want to look at it, equally out of tune. And now that I've made this video, I realize why so many music programs probably skip over it, because it just opens so many cans of worms. Now I feel like I gotta explain how much we're culturally trained to hear equal temperament, how live musicians often naturally make adjustments to get certain notes closer to just intonation. It's the reason why very professional, highly trained choirs will still sometimes end up a little sharper or flatter than where they started. It's why tuning a guitar's B string is so annoying. That major third, man. You should definitely look more into all this if it's piqued your interest, but at any rate, I hope now you know, if you didn't already, why music is the way that it is. Love to hear your comments, subscribe and turn on notifications to keep up with my music content, and I'll see you next time.
So this guy is a really great resource. His name's Andrew Wang, H-U-A-U.
H-U-A-N-G.
H-U-A-N-G. And all of that, believe it or not, all of it will be relevant to you as a sound person. Because sometimes you're the only person who can tell that two members of the band are out of tune with each other, for instance. And now you have reasons why, maybe. Oops.
We've never, okay, maybe we have. Ethan.
But,
More subtle than that.
so timbre is, if you take any note, you can break it down into its fundamental sine waves. And he talked about how some are flat, some are sharp. It's not just that, but some of them get loud at first, and then they get quieter, and then they get loud again during the duration of a note. Some of them move around. They don't just stay 14 cents flat. Some of them move around while the note is proceeding, okay? I know all this from the days of synthesizer design, trying to reproduce sound. So we'll get into something in a bit called envelopes, and I'll touch on that a little bit more. Okay, another aspect of sound, phase. This is going to be important, not just in mixing, but also in making sure your wiring is right. And normally, you wouldn't have to deal with that. We're going to have a whole troubleshooting section at the end here. But things happen, and even though you think that the system's just wired up and static and just sitting there in church waiting for you to do it, somebody kicked a wire, some wire got flexed too much, and you have problems, and one of the problems can be phase, or someone plugs something in wrong. Okay, so phase is the static or dynamic timing differences when combining identical or nearly identical audio signals. Two sine waves, for instance. Combine them. Depending on their phase, they'll do different things, if the phase is different. All right, there's your sine wave again. Now, math, by the way, there you go, Neil. Right
Both
there.
sides and sides.
Yeah. Okay. Cosine looks like this, but upside down. Right? So if at any point, if you have numerical values assigned, like if this is 1 and this is 0 and you got fractions in between, if you take a sample here and a sample down in the cosine and you add them together, you get 0. Okay? So it is technically possible, and I can demonstrate this in a digital audio workstation, for you to take a signal and flip it 90 degrees out of phase so that the peak is down here and up there. Add it back together with the original one, and the sound just vanishes. It's actually just gone. It's spooky, but I've done it. We're going to show you a little bit of demo here. This is an animation that I found very, very helpful. There it is. Let's see. Make this full screen here. No. So here we've got two wave forms. They're not sine waves. And we're adding them together. And look what happens. It gets really loud. Okay? That's what happens in the gymnasium at 53 hertz.
And we would get like kind of like that warm.
Yep. Every time the kick drum would hit, we'd go like that. It would just sound horrible. Let's have a look at, oops. There's some controls down here I need to get access to. That's not what I want. Okay, here's destructive interference. You gotta see the other waveform. You can also have waveforms that cancel each other out. So, when does this happen? This happens, and why does this happen? This happens because of the shape of the room. This can also happen because of the positioning of the mic. And I'll show you that going back here to the slides. If you, back. So if you mic a speaker cabinet, normally live you just jam the microphone right into the grill so you can keep the sound as isolated from everything else as you could on the stage. But in the studio, it's not unusual to use multiple mics on an amp, for instance, but even if you just have one like that, you not only get the direct signal, but you get a signal bouncing off the floor, or maybe the ceiling, or maybe the wall next to it. They're going to be out of phase with each other, and they're going to cancel and or reinforce certain harmonics in the sound. Now that you know what harmonics are. That can be desirable. Sometimes you want a guitar to sound honky or a lot of body in the low end, low mids or something, depending on what you're going for. Or it can be, why does my guitar sound like that? I don't like that. A lot of times it's mic positioning, as you've probably experienced, John, just goofing around with where the mic is. It can be because of phase. There's other factors as well, but we'll get into that. Okay, so that's a simple problem point that it might arise at. What about your mic and a whole drum kit, which we're going to be doing? Look at all those microphones. Every microphone is picking up everything, just at different volumes. So this happens frequently in the studio. I'll get a great kick drum sound, and then I'll turn on the tom mic, and the kick drum will all of a sudden sound really bad. It's because the tom mic is picking it up as well and canceling out some of the frequencies. All right? Once again, mic positioning will fix that for you. But it's especially phase when doing mic positioning is going to be especially critical, like with the drum kits. Now, most of the time, all the other instruments are direct, just wired right into the sound system. We don't use mics except for vocals, and now we're going to use them on drums. So we've been getting away with not having to know about this to this point. But we're trying to improve things around here. That's why you guys are here. And one of the ways we're going to improve it is with real drums.
So in essence, Matt, we could engineer out parts of the sound from the toms so that they're not interfering with.
Yes.
And essentially, we're going to engineer those, like he said, put a gate up or a wall.
No, that's
different.
That would be a different thing. What I'm talking about is phase problems.
Okay.
And the only way those are fixed is completely isolating sound sources from each other, which is impractical with drums, or physical positioning of the microphones. Move the kick drum mic this way, that way. Move the tom mic. Now, typically live, well, we're going to be talking about drums later. Don't want to go down that rat hole right now. Okay. Oh, it's rabbit hole, isn't it? Transients. A high amplitude, short duration sound at the beginning of a waveform that occurs in a phenomenon such as musical sounds, noises, or speech. So, transients are a big deal when you're talking about drums. A drum sound is almost all transient. It just sort of comes and goes, doesn't it? Something like a wood block, just buck and it's gone. Something like a piano note, though, you hit that first key and there's an attack, like, right? But it's gone quickly. But then there's something that sustains and decays, right? The transient is that thing at the beginning. Why is that important? It's important because if you tweak some of the other devices we're going to be learning about, like gates and compressors, in the wrong way, you will lose the transient. You can actually engineer out the transient, and your drums will sound even though they're real, for instance. Sometimes you want to do that. You're after an effect like that. You do swells on your guitar because you want your guitar to sound not like a guitar, right? Here's a picture of what a transient waveform looks like. It's just there and gone. Right? That's another vocabulary word for you, transient. Envelopes. An envelope is something you mail your bills in. It also is, it's a handy way to think of this effect, that how a sound changes over time, right? When it comes to Well, it's not just amplitude. Now, mostly it's amplitude. What is amplitude again? Loudness, volume, right? But you can have envelopes that control pitch. They can go at the beginning of a note. And as a matter of fact, most stringed instruments, you hit them, they go sharp right at the beginning, and then they go, then they adjust. And then they might go flat a little bit, and then they go into the right pitch. There can be envelopes for lots of things. If you were trying to, for instance, rebuild, like he did in that video, build up, say, a violin stroke, right? By adding harmonics together. Well, the first thing you could do is add the harmonics together at the right volumes. And remember, he said this sounds sort of trumpet-like, but it didn't really sound like a trumpet. You had to really use your imagination. It's because trumpets change over time when you've got the note head, right? Your lips buzz, that's a transient, when your lips are starting up on a particular note. And there can be envelopes that affect the frequencies of things too. They can be bright in the beginning and then get duller as it lives. So here's a couple of envelopes and parts of envelopes. Here's a percussive tone has, he calls it an onset. I would call that the attack. That's the more typical nomenclature. Very brief attack. There is no sustain at all. What? Offset? I don't like that terminology. This is a bad slide. I would call that decay, right? And over here with, this might be like something like a synth tone or maybe Hammond organ tone, sort of on and off. But there is a moment in time that it takes to turn on. That would be the attack. It's got a long sustain, and then it's got a really short release. Or release. Decay is something else. I'll show you that. This is the typical controls you would find on a synthesizer if you're trying to make synthesizer sounds, okay? But it's also relevant to another device a couple of other devices we'll be learning about called compressors and gates. That's why I bring it up. This is terminology you're going to need. There's an attack portion, a decay portion, which goes from the peak down to the sustain level. Then the sustain just hangs there for as long as you hold the key. And then there's a release that happens after you let go. You make that release long, it just hangs for a long time. Make it short, it goes away quickly. You probably fiddle with that a bit. And these are, actually this is not a complete list. These are just the things you guys are going to be typically dealing with. The system we're installing and the system we use now is a stereo system, okay? Stereo is not that useful in live sound situations because you think of somebody that's like, I'm in the audience and I'm going, yeah, I'm not hearing that speaker at all, right? But it is useful. I do use it. I have everything panned right up the middle. You know what a pan is? I'm sorry, you don't necessarily. There's a knob that lets you take any given sound and move it left or right. That's called a pan, right? Typically, I've seen some sound guys, they'll actually pan the drums. But once again, I'm standing over here and you slam your floor tom and it comes out of that speaker. It doesn't do me any good over here. Typically what I do is I just pan, in a live sound situation, I pan everything right up the middle. But if you're giving me a stereo guitar signal, I'll pan that hard left and hard right, and I'll get a big, glorious guitar thing happening if I'm in the right spot. If I'm not, I'll just get the mono version of it, right? Same thing with keyboards. They're typically stereo, pan them hard left and right. Same thing with echo effects. You guys have probably noticed that I like those a lot. I was watching the playback on Sunday and I thought, oh, that's too much. But anyway.
Right out of the gate.
It's on tape.
We got
We got that.
Anyway, there's a kind of delay or echo called a ping pong delay that's stereo. And it goes bing, 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 bing. And if you want something to sound like really, like whenever he hollers or you go, oh, right? I juice the echo because it just makes it sound like you're in the Grand Canyon. But then I pull it back when you're singing, or else everything sounds like mush. So it's a really nice effect. That's the only other thing that's in stereo, the way I mix. Okay? And a lot of this stuff is preference, but there's reasons why I do it the way I do it, and I'm just giving you those reasons.
Is that why we have, or is it somehow related to why we have like electric guitar left and right?
Yes.
Like there's, and
Yes,
pianos?
like when John plays, he gives me a stereo guitar signal because he's got things like delay on his guitar that he's sending to me, and it's stereo delay. Okay, keyboards, like the piano sound on the keyboard that we have, actually moves left to right as you play up and down. If it's got effects, if it's got pads are almost always in stereo, and they almost always sound gorgeous in stereo, and it's criminal to make them mono, in my opinion. So I have certain opinions. So there is this element of direction, but it's typically in a live sound situation. It's typically only applied to stereo sources. When you're in a studio, totally different animal. And distance, it's not typical. Well, I take that back. I simulate distance because, like last Sunday, Christina was there doing backup vocals to you, and her voice is like a mountain range. She's so powerful. And so I have to, when she's doing harmony, I have to pull her way back, and I sometimes even dull down the EQ so that she blends behind. It doesn't sound like two lead vocalists. So I'm putting her like at a distance. If the two of them were singing in the room, Nathan would be closer to you than she would. So that's where the distance thing comes in.
We can create that then?
Yeah, you can create it with volume, with EQ, and with if you really want to get, I mean, you wouldn't be able to tell this in the gym, but if the room's good enough, the new room's good enough, add a little more verb to her. She's going to sound further away. Okay, so.
Makes sense. Is the room gonna be good enough, Nathan?
Yes, yes it is.
So this is the worship band. See who's who.
Females from the girls.
Yeah.
And there's drums that are
Yeah, that's how you go.
All right.
I don't
So,
have hops like that in the back.
Come on, Neil.
So this will be old news to most of you, but let's go through it. It's important to know this stuff, this aspect, because there can be times when you're mixing and you're going, this does not sound right. Why doesn't this not sound right to me? Okay. A lot of times you'll hear about the bass and drums being the foundation. People also call them the rhythm section, and there are like legendary rhythm sections out there. There are legendary bass drummer teams that everybody wants on their records. Okay, this is extremely important to get right. And it's, of course, a lot of it's up to the players. If they're not locked with each other, good luck. But as far as your job, getting the tonality of these things right and getting the bass and the drums sounding like they're one instrument by the way you mix it is really, really important. Okay, and we'll learn how to do that. But that's the role. This is pop music. Essentially, we're doing pop music in church, right? And the bass and the drums, the groove, it's what it's all about. If you don't have this going on, it's just going to sound bad. It just is. This is for Micah. So, yeah, djembe is that guy over there. You've seen Micah play it once in a while. Cajon is a big box-like guy, right? Congas, I named them. And my brother
Nobody
plays.
does that. Nobody ever
I
does
know.
that.
Conga is actually just the middle
It's
drum.
just the middle one, and then
Yeah.
the quinto is a small one, and then
And
the
the tumba,
tumbas, they're
most
usually
conga
12,
players have
5,
3,
yeah,
right?
12 and a half, yeah.
So you guys can impress people at cocktail parties. My brother plays Latin percussion.
That's what I remember you telling me all about it. So.
Yeah, and you can just make those guys talk. I mean, he does things with wet fingers.
Oh, and just like, yeah, the
like that.
rolls. With
It's
the,
just amazing. Yes, tambourines, they should be banned from, well, general public. You can use it in the band. But no, we used to have a tambourine confiscation squad at the last church I was in. Oh, yeah. You walked in with a tambourine, we took it away from you, you could get it at the back at the beginning. Yeah.
Here's your tag.
Well,
After that.
Because that is the loudest thing from stage, no matter what's going on.
Yeah.
You don't even have it mic'd. And it just dominates over the top of everything. Now, it's not actually physically louder. Can anybody guess why? If there's a worship band just playing full tilt, and somebody's banging the tambourine up there, why we still hear the tambourine?
Frequency.
There you go.
High.
It's sitting in a part of the frequency spectrum that nobody else is in. It's alone up there. The guitar's not living up there. The vocals aren't living up there. The only thing else that lives up there is cymbals. So you got this thing going wacka, 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 which normally nothing is doing that up there unless the cymbal guy's riding it. But drummers, don't typically do that except when they get to the chorus or the bridge or something. They don't live on the cymbals unless they're not good drummers. I have partial hearing loss from a not good drummer. Bodhran will probably, I don't know if we'll ever use one of those, but they're a big frame drum, Irish frame drum. They go boom like this, and you can pitch them, right? They're really cool. Timbales, do you have any?
I don't. Of all the stuff I have, I don't have it.
Yeah, you gotta get some
I'll
timbales.
put it on the list, though. Don't you worry.
Timbales they're sort of like,
Yeah, I can use them.
sort of like special purpose, they're Latin. They're sort of like a special purpose drum, tom. And you can get them pitched, and they're only about this deep, and they only have one head, and they're just this really percussive. They're just great for that kind of music. They just really cut through. And then there's just tons of other stuff. There's the what is that? The cabasas.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's what's the one that goes from the Paul Simon song? It goes. That's a percussion.
Yeah,
You know that thing?
the little thing that comes down
Yeah.
the middle and you scrape.
Yeah, my brother's got one of those
Yeah.
too.
Mhm.
Anyway, we probably won't be using that. He's got a samba whistle though. That would be fun in church.
Those are really cheap too.
It just sounds like a gym whistle. All right, there's Nathan.
Oh, there we go.
Believe it or not, these are considered, a lot of the times, all of these things are considered rhythm instruments. The way that we use piano, the way that Dan was playing piano on Sunday he was part of the rhythm section. He was right. Anytime you do that, you're a rhythm instrument. That is kind of the next layer on top of the percussion, right? So, and actually, this is kind of the sequence within which I do sound check. Is I'll do drums first, then I'll bass, then guitars, and I'll make sure that they all sound nice together. I typically don't have to make them play together step by step, but as you're learning, you might want to be able to do that. But I dial them in individually. I do have the bass and the drums play together usually, but then I dial everything else in because I kind of generally know where they're going to sit because of experience. But and even the organ, which people think like this. I don't know if you've seen, like I did it on one or two of the things where I played, but you can use the organ percussively. It's really quite fun to do that. And then you've got melody and harmony sitting on top of everything else. Yeah, I don't know who that is. trying to.
Elton John.
It's Elton John. I was trying to think. What's our equivalent is what I was trying to think. Yeah. Anyway. Most in our world, most of the melody and harmonies take care of vocals. We're hoping that we might get some string players in, or maybe a sax player would be really. Believe it or not, sax is a really worshipful instrument when it's played well. But it's important to realize that now most. As a sound person, it's not really your job to tell the band how they should play, to a degree, okay? You do need their cooperation if they're playing too loud, okay? But here's where the psychology of being a sound man comes in, okay? You don't go up there and go, you're too loud. You go up there and you go, I can't get you to sound good in the PA. I really want to get you to sound good in the PA. The only way I can do that is if I use the microphone. I can't use the microphone because you're so loud, and I don't have to. But if you turn down a bit, I can add a lot more tone. And they go, ooh, okay, instead of just saying, turn it down. There's a lot of psychology involved. But when most of the music we do on Sunday morning is already just heavily arranged, and we're using previous arrangements. Nathan and I have talked about pushing everybody to the point where we come up with our own someday. And part of that process is this deal where you're playing out at the end of the service. Like when I was, this Sunday I asked you to start soloing, and the previous Sunday I asked Nathan to start soloing. It's me putting on my producer hat, which is not, as a sound guy, you should not do that. But I do it anyway. But these things exist. So what I do as a sound guy, while we're still on this slide, is, hopefully I'm familiar with the songs, and at every point in the song, there needs to be something that the listener is focused on. So there's lots of instrumental breaks in what we do, but solos have gone out of style for some reason. So find something, okay? So if there's an instrumental break and we're not doing solos, but there's a melody happening on the piano, juice the piano so that there's something for the audience to focus on instead of this blur of sound or wall of sound. Even if this wall of sound sounds nice. If it's just an interesting rhythm thing, for God so loved the world, right? Those instrumental breaks, juice those drums. That's what it's all about, right? But typically, solos and decorations and melodic and harmonic stuff are what you would use to fill those spaces. Okay, so who's a reader here?
Wow.
Yeah, I tried to find the most obnoxious piece of music I could find. Structure of the typical contemporary song. Okay, I'm going to embarrass myself here. So, you guys probably all know this, but we're just going to, for those of you who don't, we're going to go through it. For those of you who do, this will be a review. Okay.
Nice.
Which one's me? These are the bits of a typical pop song. Not every pop song has all these parts. The one that I picked does. Intro, verse, A and B verse. Now a lot of worship songs, they're simple. They keep them simple so people can sing along with them. Mm-hmm. Okay. But a lot of pop songs are even dumber. Did I say that a worship song is dumb just now? Is that what I just did? Pop songs a lot of pop songs, I was listening to one today while I was mowing the lawn, and it was just two chords over and over and over. They just changed the melody and the instrumentation. When I was a rock star, we used to walk uphill both ways. We wrote, it was the 80s, so we wrote songs that had all of this stuff involved. If it stayed one way too long, it was boring, so we did something else. Really strong melodic content, so like that. So intro, verse A and B, you'll hear all this. A and B verse, pre-chorus, chorus, a bridge / breakdown, an instrumental, and a couple more choruses and an outro. Okay? These days, people would take verse A and B and they'd make that into a song. They'd make the chorus into a different song. They'd make the bridge into a different song. But anyway, I'm whining. All right, so let me.
You're not wrong.
Right, you words.
Don't give me eyes to see, I see fine. It's too hard to have any fun when you're crying. Don't give me ears to hear every sound. When I hear the facts, it brings me down. Don't wanna talk about it, it makes me nervous. Every time I hear about sacrifice and service, it's too dangerous out there on the front line. Don't bother me now, I'm having such a good time. Hear no, see no, don't wanna talk about it. Hear no, see no, don't wanna listen. Hear no, see no, don't wanna listen to this. Oh no. Don't give me the line that talks about me. Just read me the verse about personal gain. Too much conviction finds my mind. Pusa, logic, suits me fine. Don't wanna talk about it, it makes me nervous. Every time I hear about sacrifice and service, never could handle any confrontation. I can't believe I'm having this conversation. Hear no, see no, don't wanna talk about it. Hear no, see no, don't wanna listen. Hear no, see no, don't wanna listen to this. Oh no. No, see no, don't wanna talk about it. Hear no, see no, don't wanna listen. Hear no, see no, don't wanna listen to this. Oh no. Hear no, see no, don't wanna talk about it. Hear no, see no, don't wanna listen. Hear no, see no, don't wanna listen to this. Oh no. Hear no, see no, don't wanna talk about it. Hear no, see no, don't wanna listen. Hear no, see no, don't wanna listen to this. Oh no.
So, why is it important to know that? Oops. It's important to know that as a sound person because if you find yourself in a situation where you're mixing for someone because they called you up at the last minute and asked you to save the day, which has happened to me more than once and will happen to you if you take this seriously and get a reputation going, you are stuck in a position where you're not familiar with the band or their songs, but you can anticipate. I hear a solo coming, or I hear okay, wait a minute now, someone's probably going to start singing shortly here, or there's probably going to be a harmony jumping in here. I think you guys probably instinctively understand most of that, but if you feel like you don't, next time you're listening to music, do a little bit of an analysis of it. Actually, I do it every time I listen to music. Music's been ruined for me in that way. But it's actually a fun exercise. But like I was saying, a lot of contemporary music is much more simple than this. There was a lot going on in this. So we're already 10 minutes past our time. That was lesson 1. So you guys go home and get those pieces of software, install them, fiddle with them, look up some, there's a lot of great resources around Reaper on learning how to use it. You just need some basic ability to get around. So one of the things, let me give you a few things you're going to need to know how to do in Reaper. You're going to need to know how to import tracks. You're going to need to be able to fiddle with the EQ, the equalization.
That's within Reaper, right?
Within Reaper, yeah. Compression and gates we'll fiddle around with. But mostly, I wouldn't worry about those other ones too much. Mostly just importing tracks is a little bit odd. It's not the first thing you usually want to do with a digital audio workstation. The other two, there's going to be plenty of resources on, but you're going to have to dig a little bit to find out how to import tracks. So I'm not going to tell you how to do this, but if you have trouble, in this email I'll send out, you'll have my return email, and you can just say, how do I do this? Okay? I'll be available via email for any questions you have. Do you have any questions right now?
Are we meeting next week?
That is an excellent question. We need to figure that out. Monday is Memorial Day. I'm willing to do it, but I understand if nobody else wants to, or if we want to push it off to Tuesday. I can do, I'm flexible on all of that. What does everybody think?
I don't know if I could do Tuesday.
You probably can't do Tuesday. What does everybody think about Monday night? Be
Memorial Day.
worn out?
We got a grill here?
Oh, that's an idea. Should we do it? Should we meet Monday? All right, we'll do it. What's up next week? We're going to get into some of the actual practical stuff next week. And we'll see how quickly we can blast through this stuff, but we got through what I thought we'd get through tonight. And so if my estimations are correct, it's going to be 10 weeks, but we'll see.
Are we bringing back the wedges?
No.
Back to wedge Monday.
All right, excellent.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, thank you so
Yeah.
much. Yeah.
Is it okay? Did I do okay?
Yeah, it's
Yes.
great.
That's great.
Good.